So not bad with no rehearsal.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Thank you. So there's several themes that are going on today. We've already mentioned Earth Day at this time of year. And then within the church, on the Protestant side and the Catholic side, there's two different emphases also. On the Protestant side, this is the Sunday designated to remember Jesus as the Good Shepherd. And so the story in John 10 where he says that I am the Good Shepherd and talks about the way in which a hireling, you know, when the wolf comes, well, the hireling skedaddles. And the Good Shepherd is willing to lay down his life for the sheep. And then as well, on the Catholic or the Orthodox side of it, today, or actually tomorrow, officially the 23rd, is the feast day for St. George, of St. George and the Dragon fame. And so that will be what the sermon is about. And then there's one more, and it's negative, but I want to mention it because it's just simply important. And that is, of all the different tragedies and atrocities that humans have committed against each other, the largest one that is unacknowledged and unapologized for is the genocide of the Armenians. So this would be in 1915, and it would be April 24th was when it began. So 240 some of the leaders of the Armenian people, 2 million of them, 1.5 million were killed. And of the 500,000 left, most of those were exiled. And it's never been acknowledged or apologized for. And so that's on Tuesday. And so in your heart, in this notion of unity, keep them in mind, both the perpetrators and the victims, same as you do with Israel and Palestine. Okay, St. George and the Dragon. I've had a blast researching this. It's really been a lot of fun. But I want to start off with a description of a scene from Game of Thrones. Don't remember what season it was, but Daenerys Targaryen is the princess heroine who has come into this one small kingdom where the king there is particularly brutal. He's a genuinely evil bad guy. You do not like this guy at all. And he has thousands upon thousands of slaves, all of whom are mistreated. And Daenerys, meanwhile, is wanting to overthrow this kingdom, but she's also wanting to build an army. And so she strikes a deal with this king. In exchange for the release of all your slaves, I will give you one of my dragons. She has 3 big ones. And the king is like, he's wary of this. He really, really wants one of these dragons bad. But he's wary. And he finally agrees to the terms. Yes, I will release them all in exchange for the dragon. There's a servant off to the side. Here's this dragon. It's huge. It's seated. It's minding its own business. But there's an iron collar around its neck and then an iron chain coming down to a handle that this poor servant guy has a hold of there. And so they make the exchange. They make the agreement. The servant guy goes over and hands this leash to this king. He's thrilled. Except he doesn't know the nature of dragons. Nobody asked this dragon, are you cool with this exchange? A dragon serves only who they want to serve, or be with only who they want to be with, and the dragon didn't want to be with this guy. So he takes this leash, and the dragon is like, no, and begins flying up. So the dragon is like trying to escape. The chain is going straight up. The king is holding on for dear life. The dragon's trying to get out of this situation. Finally, the dragon says, doesn't say, but you can tell that it's like, enough. fire comes down and burns this king up to a crisp. There's a pile of ashes as this guy just collapses on the ground in black ash. The dragon goes over and alights and becomes Daenerys Targaryen's dragon again. She then turns to these thousands upon thousands of slaves and says, "You are now all free, or you can join my army," and to go release other kingdoms in her crusade across that land. And so, as a person who likes dragons, basically, and really, really didn't like that king a lot, I just loved that scene. So, St. George and the Dragon. The British author G.K. Chesterton once wrote, "Fairy tales do not give the child his first idea of bogey." And by that I mean like a bad guy. You know, the monster under the bed kind of thing. What fairy tales give the child is his first clear idea of the possible defeat of bogey. The baby has known the dragon intimately ever since he had an imagination. What the fairy tale provides for him is a St. George to kill the dragon. So tomorrow, the 23rd, is the feast day in the Roman Catholic and the Orthodox tradition. And it has been that way for nearly 1,500 years. So, a little bit of his history. There's two parts to his story, one from the 300s and one from the 1100s. And strangely, it's the older one, 1,700 years ago, happens to be the verifiable one, the true one. The other one, well, you can make up your own mind on that one. But from the 300s, St. George's life was established as being during the reign of the Roman Emperor Diocletian, late 3rd century. Actually, a document was found in the Vatican, signed by a witness by the name of Pascrates on April 23rd, which has been reported as the date of George's execution, and has since become his feast day. His father was a Cappadocian pagan senator in the Roman government, and his mother, Polychronia, was a Christian from Palestine, and then she raised George also as a Christian. George's father died when he was young. His mother inherited a very large estate, which a senator would have, and then she passed that on to her son. He decides in his late teens to join the army of Diocletian. But during the emperor's increasing and very brutal persecution of Christians, George declared himself to be one and tore down the emperor's edict in defiance. He was, of course, captured. He was tortured. He was dragged through the streets behind horses, but he would not renounce his beliefs. And then finally he was beheaded on April 23rd in the year 303. Significant number of conversions to Christianity were reported after his martyrdom. And then that led to this ever-increasing popularity, ever-increasing veneration. Several factors led to his fame. First, Diocletian was despised. George was loved. Also, his torture and his death were public and spectacular, and the story spread. And then in particular, it's also noted in his history that on his father's side there was a relative, probably an aunt, who was taken as a slave and taken to Iberia, which actually would be more up toward between Turkey and Russia now. But she was a healer, and so she became a confidant of the Queen of Iberia, and before long the Queen and then the King converted and further spread the story of this brave martyr. Now, here's where the story gets, shall we say, a bit less realistic. Despite being killed, he continued to show up a lot. Countless posthumous appearances. As we enter into the 500s and the 600s, George became the wise, faithful, brave, and very successful knight. He became the patron saint of nearly all of the armies during the Crusades. So the soldiers would tell stories of having seen him in the heat of battle, always on a white horse with a spear, and helping their side to prevail. And so churches were built in honor of him, stained glass windows of him, banners and insignias and flags. He was really becoming famous. But he wasn't done yet. Best was yet to be. Centuries pass, and now in the 1100s, let us go to a little town of Silene, near a lake in Libya, northern Africa. And in that lake, there lived, variously described as a dragon, a giant serpent, maybe an anaconda, something like that, or maybe just a large crocodile. But the beast prevented the inhabitants of Silene from drawing water from the lake and generally just terrorized the town. The superstitious townspeople were under the idea that offering young virgins, chosen by lot, as a sacrifice to this monster would keep the town safe. Inevitably, the lot fell to the king's daughter, identified in Russian icons as Elizabeth. And despite the pleas of the ruler, his daughter was sent to the lake. And so the old dragon emerged from the lake, ready to eat the princess, when suddenly St. George appeared on a radiant white horse, armed with a spear and shield and sword, and making the sign of the cross in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, stabs this dragon, transfixing it to the ground with his spear. And then the horse trampled it under its hooves as well. St. George then commanded the princess to bind the neck of the dragon with her belt and lead the beast back to the townspeople. And once there, in front of all of those citizens and also in front of a grateful king, St. George dispatches the dragon with his sword. Well, by golly, now he's really famous. And so get a load of this. His fame and his example spread all throughout Europe, east into Turkey, up into Russia, down into Africa. Countless paintings, sculptures, coat of arms, coins, more icons than you can count, prayers composed, churches dedicated. He became the patron saint of all of Russia. All of Russia, and particularly Moscow. There are 41 churches in Moscow named after him. Even have a country, not so bad, between Turkey and Russia, where Iberia is now the region of Georgia. He became the patron saint of England, where there are some 140 churches named for him. His fame spread to the New World. It was St. George's flag that was atop the main mast of none other than the Mayflower. The oldest Methodist church in the United States is St. George's United Methodist Church in Philadelphia. There are St. George cathedrals in Perth, Cape Town, and Singapore. Wow.
Wow.
Not bad. But I have to ask why. Because there's been thousands of martyrs, and why this particular one? And I'll bet there have also been a lot of people who have killed big snakes or big crocodiles. So what makes this guy so special? And here we can see the way in which the fairy tale character of this story began to take over. Details, let alone historicity, just wasn't that relevant to a really good story. And a lot of it has to do with dragons. Dragons with their deep, primordial, archetypal symbolism of fear. Deep, paralyzing fear. They are intelligent, impenetrable scales, fire-breathing, sharp talons, bigger than you, stronger than you, not to mention they can fly. They can't be tamed, they can't be domesticated. One author wrote, love this quote, he said, "Noble dragons don't have friends. The nearest they can get to the idea is an enemy who is still alive." And they've been long part of human lore and legend, going all the way back. Just looking at what's come up lately, look at these cultural examples of dragons. They make multiple appearances in Harry Potter. The Disney franchise, we have How to Train Your Dragon 1 and 2, both of them excellent. They are the absolute favorites in the Game of Thrones series, with many memorable and terrible scenes. And here, please let me renew my call for George R.R. Martin to please get some therapy. There are the trilogy novels by Naomi Novik. The title of the series is called In His Majesty's Service. Imagining dragons being part of everyday life and culture. Untamable, but every bit as smart as people. A wonderful read. And of course, Lord of the Rings. The evil Nazgul with their black riders, able to strike paralyzing fear even into the stoutest heart. So now, let's try for a deeper answer to why St. George was so famous, and the fascination with dragons and the heroics of those who fight them. Neil Gaiman wrote, "Fairy tales are more than true, not because they tell us that dragons exist, but because they tell us dragons can be beaten." Matter of fact, it's on one of the lyrics of one of the songs, that quote. And so here's the message. If you hear nothing before or after, here's the message, operating at an archetypal level. Our fears can be beaten. Based upon the story, or any number of the stories I've mentioned, there are two ways, either kill or befriend. And actually the sermon can't go much farther at this point, because I don't know what you're afraid of. I don't know what has paralyzed you with fear in the past. I don't know what has made you cower, never talking about it even to your friends or family, but all the same suppressing you, keeping you down. Are you afraid of loss, of losing someone or something, of being harmed, or embarrassed, or losing face? Do you have a secret fear that in some way you're not good enough, not smart enough, not brave enough, not talented or skilled enough, and so just plain lacking in some important way? I don't know what your specific fear might be, but I do know that ever so many people do live in fear. Secret, nagging fears that sap our energy, our joy, and our enthusiasm. If any of this applies to you, take one of these images, whichever one works for you, but chosen from our culture. Daenerys Targaryen riding on the back of one of her huge dragons, vanquishing her enemies with fire. Or on the other end of the spectrum, our little Hiccup. That was the name of the little boy in How to Train Your Dragon. Little Hiccup. The skinniest of all the kids, ever so bravely approaching a dragon, particularly a wounded one. A dragon seen as the arch enemy of his village, and then healing and befriending it. Or then fairy tale style. Mounted upon your white horse, you slay the dragon, thereby saving the beautiful princess, delivering the cowering townspeople, and receiving the reward from the king. These things operate at an archetypal level. It's extremely important that dragons aren't literally real, because they are instead the very real fears that stunt us. They are the Jungian Shadow calling to us, sometimes screaming at us to be incorporated into our life, to be befriended. Rainer Maria Rilke, in his famous book, Letters to a Young Poet, I'd like to read just 2 paragraphs. Just a profound thought that this guy had. How should we be able to forget those ancient myths that are at the beginning of all peoples? The myths about dragons that at the last moment turn into princesses. Perhaps all the dragons of our lives are princesses who are only waiting to see us once beautiful and brave. Perhaps everything terrible in its deepest being, something helpless that wants help from us. So you must not be frightened if a sadness rises up before you larger than any you've ever seen. If a restiveness like light and cloud shadows passes over your hands and over all you do, you must think that something is happening with you, that life has not forgotten you, that it holds you in its hand, it will not let you fall. Why do you want to shut out of your life any uneasiness, any miseries, or any depressions? For after all, you do not know what work these conditions are doing inside you. So Jesus said multiple times, fear not. And he also said, love your enemies. Amen.
Amen.
I wanted to take just a moment, if anybody wanted to mention what a dragon might be in their life. I know it's a private thing, don't feel any pressure, but if you wanted to share any of those kind of things, because we've all had them. We've all had them. Yes, Valerie?
You hit the nail on the head with inadequacy. Sometimes I realize I blurt out things about like, oh, I did this, oh, I did this, oh, I did this, and it's all because of insecurity. And that can be such a drag, and it's like, you are complete, you are whole, you are okay. You don't need to.
Thank you. Thank you. Did you have?
Yeah, I had one. I just had an encounter yesterday. My own anger. So I was able to feel the anger and realize, oh, it's not going to destroy me or anyone I share it with. And I befriended it. It's quite powerful.
Wow. Easier said than done.
Yeah. I was kind of tricked into it.
Cool. Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. Anybody else? Yes, Vera.
I guess about 20 years ago, I had the spiritual awareness, the inner voice that spoke to me and said, face all your fears and just go through it. So whenever a fear came up, I would just do it. The voice kept saying, just whatever it is, do it, be with it. And I was also had the feeling that even if I die, I was okay to die. I was willing to die. And so I went through countless fears for about 15 years and just did whatever came on the stage of my life. And I'm here still. So I survived, and it was telling me, it's like a dragon, but you just befriend it.
Yeah.
And be with it, and you actually will be okay, and you'll be somehow bigger than before and stronger than before, and you'll have lots of adventures, which I did.
Thank you.
And as a child, I was raised in the Eastern Orthodox Church. It's Serbian Orthodox Church in Elizabeth, New Jersey, and it was called St. George. The
Okay.
So that was
There's a lot of them. Yeah.
So that was my image as a child, and then they had the icons in the front of the
Yeah.
dragon slayer, George on the horse,
Okay.
St. George on the horse with the dragon. So that was in my image from babyhood, you know.
Oh, my.
So that was interesting.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Cool. One more? Yeah.
Oh, well, I just had a minor version of that. I joked about whenever I'm going to do something and my knees shake and I feel, I go forward and then I look back and I'm glad I did. But that's always not a warning. It can be a warning or not. But it's a feeling where I feel the fear and do it anyway, to quote somebody. But I've never been sorry. But there is that moment when you go up the steps of a plane and you're leaving stuff behind, which I've done
Yeah.
a few times, literally and then symbolically. And so you never know what's next and what might have happened had I done that at other moments. But yeah.
Thank you. There's a piece of artwork that is, I think, beautiful on it, where it shows a young person in bed at night. And the blankets are all up, so you can't really see much of the person, just a portion of their face. And then hovering over this sleeping person is a dragon, just hovering over them, you know, the night terror kind of thing. However, the teddy bear that she had with a wooden sword, you know, those play kind of swords. So the teddy bear is standing on her pillow like this against the dragon, and the dragon's going like that. So anyway, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. It was great.